overpopulation or low birth rates? Which one is it? So in this video, I'm going to be talking about how I think basically the media and, for the sake of argument, the general public, the general conceptions or beliefs of people commonly are over exaggerated, are populist, alarmist, and just plain wrong. So here is a clear example which has just recently spring into my mind, and it's the overpopulation problem versus the low birth rate problem. Now, to kind of put it into context, first we were working with the overpopulation problem a couple years ago, as part of these like global issues, right? Like one of them is climate change, environmental issues, obviously hunger, poverty, right? Like these 29 or 30 objectives that I think the United Nations has to basically combat by the 20, I think by the year 2030. These global issues, right? And like part of that rhetoric or narrative was the idea of overpopulation. Now, I fell into this trap of believing like, okay, yeah, maybe global warming isn't real or whatever, but we do have an overpopulation problem, right? There's overpopulation. There's a lot of people. There's too many people. We have finite resources. And if more people keep popping up, right? If we're going into the 9, 10, 12, 11 billions of people on Earth, that's going to basically strain our resources and cause like a global disaster, right? And then I took a look at a population density map, which actually just happened like a year or two ago for me. And then, I came to the realization that it's not an overpopulation problem, it's a concentration problem. So, like, people group together in these small areas of the world called like cities, metropolitan cities, and then they see people everywhere, and then they just say, "Oh, we have an overpopulation problem in the world," and it's like, no, the world is pretty empty, right? If you look at a population density map, and I've said this many times before, the world is empty. There's nothing there, right? So we don't have an overpopulation problem. Again, just alarmist rhetoric, right? So that was a couple years ago, right? We had this problem of like there are too many people, and it's so recent. It's like 2 years ago, just 2 3 years ago, no more than that. People were talking about overpopulation, right? Overpopulation is a problem. Okay, now fast track to today. In the middle of 2024, June, July, August 2024, there's now talk of population decline. What? People are talking about low birth rates, right? How people aren't having kids anymore, and how there's going to be a population decline. So I'm like, okay, if there was a population problem, an overpopulation problem, wouldn't population decline or lower birth rates be a good thing? Wouldn't that be like the practical solution, the go-to solution? Now, low birth rates, or the idea of population decline, is a global issue. Now that's like a new problem, right? So I was like super confused. I'm like, okay, so which one is it? Is it overpopulation? Are there too many people, or are there not enough people? Are there not going to be enough people in the future to work, to do things for services and products and whatever? So I was like super confused. I'm like, and for me, you got to understand that I never believe anything that is said, right? Like I don't consider myself a skeptic. I just consider myself like a non-believer in any of the stuff that the media portrays or says, or especially when everybody's saying it. I'm like, bro, you need to do your own research and, have your own thoughts. Like, don't just repeat what the media is saying or what everybody else is saying. So Yeah, I was like, what the hell is going on? How come there's an overpopulation problem and then now we have a low birth rate, population declining problem? I'm like, that just, for me, that's all like alarmist rhetoric. Um, so, I asked ChatGPT, I was like, so what's going on here? Like, and ChatGPT's like, yes, it is confusing, but it's because it's complex and it has several factors. ChatGPT is talking about like regional factors. Mm, excuse me. So, for example, he says, ChatGPT says, in some cases, like for example, in Africa and South Asia, you have an overpopulation problem because there are too many people and finite resources. And I say, okay. And versus like places like Japan or Europe, where I guess everybody's comfortable and there's like a lot of like woke movement and progressivism and all this, and people just aren't having kids. So there's population decline there, and there are low birth rates, right? Like people aren't having as many kids as they were before. In a matter of years, this has, or not even years, like, well, yeah, years, like 2 years, right? It's incredible. Um, but as a conclusive remark, ChatGPT says the experts say this is normal, that they were expecting a population boom and then a slow decline, right? So my question is like, what's the problem? If this is, if it averages it, if it averages out to this, what's the big deal here, right? Now, some people may say, well, averages aren't, like a good criteria point to go by. You have to look at the individual isolated cases, like the cities, the countries, the areas, the communities, right? And I would agree. But again, it's my problem. I'm conscious and I'm aware that there are world problems, there are problems out there, there are community problems, there are national problems, there are international problems, there are all these like situations. I understand too complex for one mind to understand. But my problem has always been with the way in which it's presented, right? You can go and watch my global warming video. I talk about how fear is weaponized and how it affects psychological health, right? It basically makes you afraid and it makes you paranoid and it makes you anxious about the future, worried for no reason. Like you gotta be, you gotta know that there are things that you can do and you're doing them, right? And then everything else is just left to the uncertain future. That's it. So, if you're worried about your personal issues, right, that's fine. But then to take on the burden of these global issues like overpopulation or low birth rates or population decline is just crazy. It's mental. It's detrimental to your psychological health, to individuals in general, to groups, because groups will actually start operating under these notions like mental cases. And yeah, I'm kind of like speaking without any filters here because this has always troubled me, right? This is something that has always made me very uncomfortable with the way in which like news and the media and people portray like problems, right? Like there's a problem and it needs to be blown out of proportion and like exaggerated, times 100. And it's the end of the world, and World War III and population collapse, and climate change, and we're gonna burn up, or we're gonna freeze, or nuclear war, or biological warfare, or diseases, viruses. And it's like the catastrophic mentality. I think they call it catastrophizing or something like that, where you're just thinking the worst of the worst, right? Imagining it, and not just as a thought experiment, like, oh, like I wonder what it would be like if there was a World War III, like these what if videos that are pretty fun. I watch them too, and it's like, what would happen if World War III were to erupt? Well, most likely the government would um, activate this program or whatever, everybody would have to take shelter. The wilderness would be the best safe spot. Those exercises, those mental thought experiments are fun. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when people interiorize, like they really make these issues like a personal thing. And I know this because if you try to argue against it to them, if you try to say like, no, that's not true, or are you really sure about that? Like they're dead on convinced that it's true. They're like, yeah, like, the world is ending, you know? And if you really just take a moment to look at history briefly, you'll see that like civilizations, grow and collapse, grow and collapse, grow and collapse, like it's a normal thing. And it's not like you can literally obliterate or eliminate like all of humanity and just wipe out the species, right? Like that would be really hard to do. Um, and it would take a long time, right, to effectively do it, right? To like go into every single corner of the world and making sure everybody's dead and unable to reproduce themselves, right? Like all these ideas, I think, overpopulation and all these things, ultimately what they do is they give you this mentality for fear. They get you put on your fear glasses, so then everything you see is like through fear, I think it affects you at an unconscious level, because then you're just thinking about how miserable the world is, how disastrous it is, how there's no hope. You tend to get pessimistic, and that really does affect you in your day-to-day activities as an individual, at work, with your family, with your friends, right? With the way that you think about things, right? It's not affecting the world, right? The world is there. It's not, I don't think humans have we're so small compared to the planet and to the universe that I'm not saying that we're irrelevant, right? That's another idea too that's out there that's kind of exaggerated, like we're so insignificant. No, we're not insignificant. We play our role, we play our part in life, in this universe, on this planet. But I don't think we're giants, like moving worlds, or we're not like that, moving mountains or things like that. No, like we do our bit and that's it, like any other animal on this planet. Like also the idea of like humans are animals, it's like, no, we're not. Like they say we're social animals and these things, and these ideas are kind of romantic, right? Because people will say like, oh yeah, we're animals, like, oh, that's so, we're intelligent animals, right? And it's like what does that do for you, right? Thinking that we're saying that, like, what is that? It may be true, it may be not, but again, my problem is not with the information that's presented or the ideas that are out there. It's how they're being treated, how they're being like thrown out there, and what they're being used for, right? Which is ultimately generating terror and fear and panic and anxiety, right? That's my problem. That's what I want to talk about. um, so I think a lot of these alarmist ideas may be because there are hidden agendas, right? Um, like the economy, I know it fluctuates and like the future is unpredictable. I'm a person that likes to think that things that happen on national scales, international or world scales, are planned, right? I don't really believe in coincidences. Like when this happened or that happened, it's like, oh, that's crazy, like, unpredictable. I like to think that all of that is planned. I could be wrong though, and there could just be things that happen, or I could be half right. There are things that are planned and work well. There are things that are planned and don't work well, and there are things that just aren't planned, and like sometimes it goes well, sometimes it goes bad or badly. Um, but I like to think that, and ultimately, what that does is, um, if things are planned, for instance, let's take that scenario, then ultimately they're, I mean, even if they are planned, they're still shaped by the culture waves, right? And the culture movements and the culture sentiment of the time, right? That's something that I think is very hard to control all the time. So ultimately, people are gonna decide for themselves. The groups, communities, society, mankind in a country and in this world are gonna end up making their own decisions and making their own movements, right? And but like a lot of it has to do with the economy, right? And with the wealthy people that are just trying to get wealthier, right? And I mean, as a business person, you can see how business people don't really care about others. They're ultimately just trying to see how they can benefit from the situations, right? Like with all the social movements, right? That are now like permitted or allowed in the social sphere, and that's obviously like income for the markets, right? We can talk about like sections or factions of population, right, that are now entering the market, and ultimately it's the flow of money. Now, I have nothing against capitalism or the economy. I know it's like a good thing, especially when money is moving around. Um, but these like ideas, could be used in favor or against certain in like ulterior intentions or hidden agendas, right? What are they? I'm not sure, but that could be like something that's out there. I could be wrong, right? Or I could be 50% right, like I mentioned, which would ultimately be to make the wealthy wealthier, right? I've been watching this documentary on Frontline PBS called The Age of Easy Money. Very interesting. And basically, what it boils down to, or what they're explaining in this documentary, is that the Federal Reserve, which is part of the government, prints money and lends money or gives money, injects money into the economy. But in order to do this, they do it through the banks, through buying stocks, and through Wall Street, like in the United States. So then, what the people, like the bank owners and the people on Wall Street, end up doing is they just make themselves wealthier, and they talk about this in the documentary, and they say, well, you can't expect people that are, economists or bankers or Wall Street guys to be looking out after the public, and they're right. I mean, like, just put yourself in that position. Would you be thinking about the general public? You would be like, nah, like, I don't care about people. Like, I'm just gonna make myself wealthier. I'm gonna make myself get more money. I'm gonna bring in more family members, help out my family. Like, that's all I care about, me, myself, and I, right? So it makes sense, but it's still like the inefficiencies of like government and bank and all these things, right? It's very interesting. So just to kind of finish off this video with these confusing notions of like overpopulation and low birth rates, my question to you is like how good is your memory, right? And beyond that, how good is our memory as a collective society? Because it seems mm, like every couple of months, like our memory is resetted, right? Or it's like, reprogrammed. Like, we forget things that have happened, obviously because of human capacities, capabilities, right? We can't remember everything all the time. But for me, it's kind of like I remember the overpopulation problem just 2 3 years ago, and now they're talking about a low birth rate population decline problem. So for me, that's like cognitive dissonance, it like doesn't match up. It doesn't make sense. I'm like, it doesn't add up. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we just had this problem, and now the solution, or the apparent solution to that problem, is now another problem. So you're just talking to me about problems all the time. Like, stop talking to me, right? Um, so yeah, the food for thought conclusion here is like, basically, think about how good our memory is, right? Do you remember the overpopulation problem, and now there's a low birth rate problem? And what other things do we not remember, right? From history, from like a couple decades ago, from, a couple 100 years ago, a couple 1,000 years ago, right? That we just tend to repeat, right? And we don't learn our lessons, right? We keep making the same mistakes. We keep finding or applying the same solutions to the same mistakes. They say that's the definition of crazy, expecting different results, right? So there's a lot to learn from history, I think. There's a lot to learn from the past. And in order for this, we need to keep our memory refreshed, right? Don't let people lie to you. Don't let people put ideas in your head that just don't add up, right? Question it, but don't question it like stupidly, right? Don't question things just to question them either, right? Like if you just want to be annoying and question things, that's not productive. Like when you question things, you need to question things with an intention, right? Where you want to get somewhere, you legitly want an answer, you seriously want an answer, or you're looking to shape minds or change minds, right? You're just not looking to fight for the sake of fighting, or be annoying, right? So yeah, think about how good your memory is, and think about how good the collective memory is. And that's all I got for this video. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace.